Where I thought I would start first was, aren't you exhausted after learning about mavens? Doesn't it make you absolutely, as a marketer, exhausted? I can actually relate to that because having spent a number of years at HP where we moved to that audience base and looked at targeting them and trying to figure out how do we actually engage these people. It gets quite exhausting, which is actually perfect timing. I'm kind of the blend of where you started in the conversation today. We started with data and the importance of data. And actually, even if you take a step further back and you think about what Steve King said when he came up, and he mentioned the fact that really digitization is about an action, a finger swipe. And you think about all of the actions that we as marketers are generating today, as we as people are generating today. So you think about that and how that translates into data. And then the last presentation, which was really about, okay, what the heck do I do with all that data? How do I actually make sense of it in terms of constructing a marketing program that actually makes sense for my business? So hopefully what I can do is try to put those two pieces together. And I will talk a little bit about not just performance. So it might be surprising to you that someone who comes from a performance marketing agency isn't just going to talk about ROI, and we'll get to that later in the agenda, probably tomorrow rather than today. But really, what's important is how do you take those learnings from that performance and actually apply them to really the strategy part, the insight part. And I think Stephen said it very well, which is how do I take what I've learned and apply that to the creative side of my business, which is also vitally important today. It's not just about talking about results or data or ROI. We have to think about all of those things cohesively. So with that, let's start, went a bit too far here, with where we should always start a marketing program, with the consumer, which is something that I was very passionate about, have been very passionate about my entire career. For one thing, I felt like being a consumer advocate was just smart, good business sense. It was knowing more about that person so that we could actually talk to them, remember our role is messaging, in a way that caused them to change their point of view about a product or service. And so understanding the consumer was vitally important for developing an eloquent strategy that then persuaded someone to do something. And I think that's really important if we start here and think about the old marketing, the marketing that we've been doing for 50, 60, 70 years has been about delivering a persuasive message that changed someone's opinion. And all of our marketing tools, our marketing processes, our marketing approach that we're still using today, quite frankly, are based on the fact that we want someone's opinion to change and are focused on developing a message that will cause that to happen. So where do we start with this insight? We usually start, and I think we talked about this in several presentations, with some type of demographic information. And it's pretty generic. I think Stephen already talked about this. He and I didn't compare notes completely ahead of time, but it's not surprising, honestly, that we're so aligned. And you'll see that I need more search metrics here. This was a big aha for me. In 2004, 2005, I was actually sitting on the client side of the business. I was managing HP's global search program. I actually hired my own company as my partner at that time. I did not foresee that I would be sitting in this seat in the future. But I was starting to see interesting search data points that I thought, wow, this is interesting. I'm wondering if I'm seeing this same trend in other data sources of knowledge about our business that could potentially impact what's really going on in the marketplace. It could impact even more than our marketing strategy. But what's amazing is today, how many people are still starting with the same demographic profile. And that's really all that they're using. I just actually judged some marketing campaign programs for a program in our industry, kind of an industry ad awards type of program. And I was amazed on two things. One is I was amazed at how many people were still starting with demographics, and that's the only insight that they were using to actually inform their campaign approach. And I was also amazed at how many people were just using clicks to evaluate the success of their program. So on both ends, we were lacking insight. But this is 2012. And if you're just using those simple frameworks, you're probably not going to develop an effective marketing campaign that really enriches or causes action on behalf of your participant. And we'll talk about that for a minute. So I'm going to focus a little bit because I wanted to ground this presentation in a bit. I'm going to talk at a high level on theoretics to give you kind of a construct of a new framework in terms of thinking about your program differently, but I'm also going to ground it in search specifically. You could actually, as I think Stephen implied, you could take a variety of different data inputs and construct them for the framework that works best for you. But I wanted to ground it in search because it is obviously something that Performix, that's what we specialize in. It was where we didn't necessarily start completely as a search business. We started as an affiliate marketing company, that performance marketing space. But it gives you a good example of how you might just take this data and actually use it to start shaping and informing your marketing programs in a way that you might not think about or you might not be doing today. So obviously, why search? Obviously, we all rely on search, much more than you could potentially think about today. It's kind of ingrained and hardwired in who we are. I look at my kids who are 19, 23, and 25, and they will force an object to search, whether it's the television or some type of format. They're going to force it to search whether it actually is built or functions well to search at all. But what's really important is that action, the action that we're taking when we're searching, we're sending signals. So those are being translated into data that then can be used to send us signals about those actions. And I think that's what I want to focus on today, is not just the importance of search, but taking that information and actually using it to inform your campaign. And obviously, all of those search signals, some of these slides you've seen already, are transforming us into fundamentally mind-blowing amounts of data. So when I entered the marketing space, which was a while ago, I will admit, I never imagined the amount of input that I would actually have from a marketing standpoint. And as you just saw, I think in the recent presentation, there's a lot of information that almost can be overwhelming. So how do we take that and shape it in a way that's meaningful, that can be useful to understand? So back to where we are today and what I like to call this age of participation. We are unlike when we were really the age of persuasion, where we were actually persuading people to change their opinion about something. We have entered a stage of unprecedented activity and connectivity. If you think about the amount of actions and how many times you reach for a device, whatever device happens to be the closest to you or the most convenient for the activity that you want. That's what we as marketers are responsible and accountable for today. We want to capture that activity. So one of the things that I wish that I would have patented about 5 years ago is the ability to actually have coffee tables that have plugins built into them. Because I don't know how many times that I reorganized the stacks of devices in my living room that require charging at different times. But now, if we see something on television, if we get a cue from somewhere else, the fact that we instantaneously reach for a device, and that action is something that as a marketer we want to capture or even potentially initiate and take advantage of. So with that new behavior, with all of these actions that are actually occurring around us today, the big aha for me, and this happened about, right before I left HP, and I've been gone about 6 years now, I thought, all of the tools, the processes, the philosophies, the approach to marketing that we've been using, really since the entrance of broadcast media. So when radio came about, when television came about, are really broken. And I think that the aha for me was I was sitting in a room at HP. I was in charge of launching a huge program for North America specifically. I had a global responsibility, but I was trying to get North America off the ground. I wanted to create an integrated marketing program, and that sounded really great, integrated. I used to be in charge of that. I used to know what that meant. And I started making a list of all of the individuals that I would need to invite to the meeting to actually have a conversation about how all these pieces worked together for the program. And I came up with 60 names, 60 people, and that included people inside the company as well as their respective agency partners, Performix and Zenith being two of them. And I thought, wow, this is really messed up. All of the tools that we use to actually create marketing are no longer really effective. We need something different because we've really entered a new phase where the old stuff just isn't working. So I actually left HP, and I was lucky enough to go to several organizations that were tolerant enough to allow me to test some of my theories out, which is in your packages. I think you have my product just off the shelf. I created a book recently, wrote a book recently about this passion, about this, what we can do as marketers in this new age of participation. If really our role has moved from being people who persuade individuals to change their minds or have a different opinion, our job now is to create some form of action, because that's what people are doing. Then we really need to understand, we used to understand how people think and what their thought processes were and what we needed to say from a creative messaging standpoint in order to get them to change their minds. We now need to really understand what causes them to join, like, engage, what causes them to take action and take part with the brand. That's what's most important today. So you and I are not alone in this journey. It's interesting that IBM is actually co-sponsoring some research that you can actually find this study online, and you can participate, ironically, in this study online. They're still gathering information, but as of the last time I checked, nearly 2,000 CMOs had participated in this study online, and they believed that new marketing was really about focusing on relationships. So it wasn't just a one-way message that needed to be delivered in the marketplace, and it wasn't just about transactions, it was somewhere in the middle. So it was about understanding enough to cause people to take action, but also you want transaction to happen and you want to understand enough about the results of that transaction to therefore inform the relationship. And I think as we talked about the Yahoo, I think her analogy was sometimes you feel like you're in a tornado. If you're outside of that tornado, you sometimes feel like you're out of touch. I like to use the spiral metaphor as well. As marketers, our goal is to keep that spiral spinning. So not only in our processes of using the data to actually inform the decisions, to take action and vice versa, but also as marketers to encourage participation continually, because we are no longer in charge of integration. Our constituents, our customers are in charge of that integration. So it's our goal to create the content that's meaningful, that speaks to them, to allow them to be the integrators for your program. The other thing that you will find that's interesting about this study is that many marketers are saying that they've actually done one of two scenarios in terms of convincing or not convincing their executive leadership that they actually are delivering results. There's two likely scenarios. The first set of marketers said they have convinced their leadership that there's no way to actually measure what they do, and so just forget about it, can't be measured. The second set of marketers have convinced their leadership that actually they know exactly what causes the cause and relationship and they are delivering results, but it's not necessarily real. Neither situation is actually benefiting those CMOs. And so I think we're at the precipice of a real change point. And if you think about what Stephen talked about in terms of, it's easy to look backward and say, gosh, Galileo or whomever really had great ideas that resonate and make sense. I think we're at that point from a marketing standpoint with the data and information that we have, with the evolving processes and approach that we're taking with our constituents. In 5 or 10 years, will we be at a real turning point where marketing won't be recognizable to what it has been the last 50 or 60 years. So again, just to refresh, we're moving away from persuasion, and what we deliver today needs to be contextual, because we've already established, I think, both with Stephen and with the Yahoo conversation about the mavens, that it needs to be contextual. It needs to be relational, because this is all the media in the world that we live in today. And more importantly, it needs to be motivational, which is kind of where we landed in the context of developing a new framework to where you can think about, how do I motivate people to actually take part in something? It needs to be motivational. And a lot of this comes from the search environment. So if you think about how we can actually tie this back to search in meaningful ways, search sends a variety of different signals back. What you're searching for can actually provide information that you might not have thought about. So in this case, what someone searches for might tell them interesting information about something that you didn't know about, or how can I become more competent at something. It actually empowers you to find out information that you might not have otherwise thought that you could find something out about. And it also provides you the open door to actually allows you to connect with other individuals that you might have similar interests to yours. So search is really that gateway door today that we use to provide you with a variety of different sources, including what you're influenced by. We talked about this with the mavens. How do you feel empowered? What empowers them? What influences them? Who do you influence? And if you can really put those pieces together, rather than the old demographics view that we looked at, and if you think about this, really thinking about both the paid, earned, and the owned spectrum, you put all these pieces together, you have a much better picture of that individual that you're not just trying to persuade, you're trying to develop an ongoing relationship with. And we'll talk here in a minute about how we've kind of proven this out one way or another. In today's world, it's really important to have this complex picture, because your constituents are smart enough to know when you don't have enough information, when you're not being contextual, when you're not being relevant. They're going to call you out on it. It's going to become very clear. It's like when I was on Facebook 2 weeks after I attended the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, and they sent me gambling addiction ads. Why? Because I had a post that said I was in Vegas. Does that mean I have a gambling addiction? No, right? But how often does this happen to you, where someone is taking pieces of information that may or may not be relevant and applying them in a way that doesn't make sense to you? And your expectation now is, aren't they smarter than that? But it's hard, as we just talked about for mavens. It's really hard, right? It's really overwhelming. So this is where we've developed at Performix a very simple formula. And it's not a scientific formula. So for those of you who are left-brained, and I have to tell my very left-brain team this all the time, this is a new philosophical framework. It's only in a formula form to make it memorable and easier to understand. And it's very simple. So if we're using a behavior-based framework and we want to motivate people to take action, there are really 3 variables that cause people to take action. And this is not a marketing thing. This is actually a sociology, psychology thing. This formula, per se, these 3 variables, have been used in education. They've been used in human resources. It's what helps employers keep employees happy. It was used by Maslow. It's been around a long time. More recently, there are intrinsic motivation experts. The two of the leading experts are Richard Ryan and Edward Deci, who actually teach at the University of Rochester in New York. But this is the first time it's been applied to marketing. And it's really only been relevant to marketing now, because we really need to understand what motivates people. So here's what the formula stands for, and you've seen a lot of this today. In the Mavens, it showed up over and over again. But D is for discovery. As humans, we love to continually learn about things. We love to become competent at things. And so we have this insatiable need to know more, to learn more. How many tweets, how many Facebook posts did we talk about that the Mavens actually craved? If you look at the younger generation, their insatiable need for information is mind-blowing. And I think there's an active and kind of a inactive approach to both, part of it because of the world that they live in. So there's an active engagement when you're searching for information or you're seeking out information from your friends or your network. And then there's this subconscious stream that's always happening because they're always connected to how many friends. So they have that insatiable need for discovery that just never ends. The E is for empowerment. So again, this comes back to motivating people to actually take part in something. If you're going to sign up for something, are you going to do it if you don't feel like you have a meaningful role? So again, as marketers, our role is to make sure that we're satisfying that need for discovery, but we're also empowering our constituents to take part in that. So are we enabling them to pass information on? Are we making it taggable? Are we making it shareable? Are we providing information in a variety of different channels that enables that to happen? The C is for connections. So how many times did we see the Mavens' importance on connectivity show up? And this is not just about connectivity with a brand. So I think it's easy, having lived as a brand, to understand the brand kind of assumes, well, I just need to make myself available, even though as a brand that's scary and we really don't want to. But also the importance of community is really imperative. People like to find other individuals who have similar interests to their own. So adding that as part of the componentry as you're developing your marketing campaign is really important. So think about just developing a search campaign. How am I creating keywords that actually help people discover and learn more about my product or service? How do I help them empower and share that information from a search standpoint? Am I making it shareable, likable? Am I providing content that's meaningful on my landing page? How, from a connectivity standpoint, do I have keywords that point them to communities that exist, of people passionate or even customer service and support about that product or service? So what happens when you put all of those componentry together? You actually get greater participation, and if you get greater participation, you have better performance. So that's the simple formula, but I wanted to take it at a deeper level. And so I'm going to dive into search here in a minute and start to use that about how you can take this and apply it using search specifically. So if you do this, you really have an opportunity to break free. We started with demographics, right? But really it's about people, it's about relationships. We're moving from impressions to expressions because we're talking about actions. We're moving from reach, while reach is still very important, but to impact, which is perhaps even more important than reach. It's not either or, it's and. We're also moving from shouting to listening. So it's important to remember, again, that we're going to apply this back to our program. This should be this perpetual circle where we're listening, we're learning, we're applying, we're getting results. We're going back to square one and developing our program enriched from where we started. We're moving from consumers to participants. I don't have a problem with the word consumer. It's just that, like Galileo or others that started early on, it's hard to change your behavior sometimes as a marketer because we've been using the same tools, the same process, the same language. And if you're forced to change your language, my lesson is it forces you to change how you're thinking about things a little bit differently. And if we're, instead of having just consumers where you need to spoon feed them information and they don't necessarily have an opinion, to people that really you want to actively engage with and have a relationship with. We're moving from transactions to relationships. Again, this isn't either or, it's and expectations, obviously, to actions. So keep these things in mind, because as we move to really thinking about how we evaluate and measure, these are important. So what I'm finding is that this is great in utopia, but we are still in that learning stage. We're at that tough stage where it's hard. And I just wanted to take a few minutes and have empathy with you on that. And I get it, because I lived in a really big organization where change is hard. And working with the variety of different clients that we work with at Performix, I'm seeing that while today's marketplace is really holistic, many of our brands are still working very much in isolated silos. And that makes it really hard to develop this holistic customer experience today. Today's marketplace is also amazingly dynamic, while many of our models are still very much static and stayed, and that's tough. Today's marketplace is very much networked, but not by us. So again, you think about the mavens. Nobody apparently is controlling what the mavens or even having an influence in terms of what the mavens are, except for the mavens. And that is, in many cases, the world that we're living in. And today is reciprocal, but only if the participant finds value in that, as we talked about the Vegas example. If you give me something that I believe in, yes, it's a reciprocal value, but just remember that as a marketer. There is hope, and I wanted to talk about the fact that I am seeing kind of a new marketer emerge. In 2008, Forrester actually created a marketer maturity model for digital marketers, and actually when they created it, the number 5 category did not exist. And they have chosen not to actually update this model recently, so we've taken the liberty to actually update it. We don't call it a model, we call it a path, kind of this path of progression that we're seeing in marketers. So if you look at the far left, we had skeptics at one point in time, these people who were very much data averse, who were very much technology averse, and very much focused on total message control. And if you think about the old persuader way of doing things, that very much resonates there. I'm going to control the message, and whatever I say, that person's going to do. As they got more technology emboldened and became more embracive of data, then we had people that started to experiment and to understand the benefits, and from there went to a practitioner. Was like, okay, we've got this now, and we're starting to play with it a bit. And started to develop a test and learn culture, and really talked about more channels holistically. Moving on to the conductor, where you're truly embracing digital, you're optimizing data, you're starting to put governance in place because you're understanding that one channel affects another. And you're thinking about performance in your marketing. And finally, you have this revolutionists over here who are real digital insights. They're really using insights to drive performance and to inform their campaigns ahead of time. They're integrating their plans, and they're becoming agile. So one thing I would think about here is I never actually look out there and say, you are here with my clients. I rather say, where are you, or where do you think you are, because you know best about what's going on inside your organization, and where is your competitor? Because whoever gets there first to the right in the marketplace will win with the constituents, with the clients, with the customers, with the participants. And if you think of the skeptics were hunters, in terms of the old analogies that we used to use in our language, we were much more hunting-based analogies. I'm going to target something, I'm going to shoot it. These guys are gardeners. They're constantly nurturing the relationship. And I think that's also a very important distinction to think about what's happening there. So if I'm really testing and learning constantly, and I have 10 things in the queue, so that when something stops working, I can immediately put another one up there. And there are great rules for that in terms of how can I become more of a nurturist, as I call it, environment from a gardening standpoint versus a hunting, I'm going to go out and shoot it and I'm done and I'm gone. And we'll talk about that from an actual results standpoint here in a program that we looked at for one of our clients and one of their competitors in terms of them exactly a company, I won't name which company it is, company A treated it very much more of a nurturing environment where they learned and they immediately implemented those. And then company B treated it as, okay, campaign's done, I'm gone, and the results are very telling. So those revolutionary marketers will actually deliver results and win in the space. So let's dive a few minutes deeper, because it's great to talk philosophically about, yes, I can change all this philosophy in my company, but it's also hard to do that overnight, and I have empathy for that. And so I wanted to give you a few, I think, tangible and meaningful ways that we're working with a few of our clients just purely based on search. How can I take search insights and start to enrich who the participant is that I'm starting to have a relationship with? And the first thing that I want to establish here, again, our goal is actions. So remember, instead of persuading someone to change their mind, we're persuading someone, or we're motivating and inspiring people to actually take actions. So actions can actually become a proxy for your need states. So if you think of the purchase stages, which we have to keep something that's real and tangible and that we know, the purchase states can go across the top. How do you actually create campaign goal proxies based on behaviors? And I just put the D, E, C off to the side, just to keep those top of mind. So in terms of D, where do we have awareness, evaluation, research, information gathering? It's really that discovery component. In E, it's really you've moved on to active preference or purchase intent, but how you're empowering those people to actually take that intent. You want them to take that action. And then C, here comes your social sharing, your advocacy, your post-purchase. So again, these actions are really important. And again, we're looking very simply at search here, but obviously you can use this in combination with any other KPIs to actually develop and think about this. So as an important starting point in terms of defining the participant decision journey for search, it's always great to establish just category norms. Okay, what things do we actually believe to be true so that we can all agree upon them before we get started? So the first is there's always some form of catalyst for search. And I think we know that. Is it a television ad? I'm sitting in front of the television and I have my iPad on my lap. Is it someone mentioned something to you? There's a catalyst somewhere that drives you to that first action. Then there's context and needs that define the query. So again, we're starting to develop and dimensionalize that person based on the types of keywords that person actually searches for may help define some of that context. The third one is one query can move people across multiple journey stages. So I think we used to think that there was a very progressive, very linear approach to search. And I think we now know that that's simply not the case. In fact, we now know that people can go all the way through their journey and start over again. There's a recent even a car study that shows that now that people are so informed that new cars may show up like 8 months on their new car list into their journey for searching for the right car. So making sure that, again, we're doing all of these things simultaneously is important because you never know exactly where you are in the process. A static is that behaviors change across devices. We have quite a bit of information that shows that today. And we have to keep into context that when you're searching for something on a mobile device, your intent may be very different than if you're searching on your tablet or on your laptop. And participant engagement can be both passive and active. Just talked about this with Yahoo. Great example, right? They're both really important, and they're both, from a search standpoint, important considerations. So knowing those things and taking them into account, we can start to build a map that ties back to our original journey path that we might think of when we're developing our profiles for our customers using the search. So what is the catalyst? What device, touch points, is that person using? We're searching for feedback loops in terms of what is the starting action and what is their experience across the search engine results page, across the content networks, social, YouTube. Are there multiple searches and multiple user experiences? And we start to develop it across that purchase path. And the goal would be to do this for each group of participants that you're looking at reaching or having a relationship with your organization. So in this case, we have a client who has 5 or 6 different journey paths that they're looking depending on the product or service that they're actually mapping to. And they may have different participant journeys for each one of those product or services. But you start to build a much more robust approach to the individual that you're trying to have a relationship with. And obviously, mapping these to other data is really important. So if you have gaps, as we often do, we only have limited information for whatever reason. Maybe the customer only has certain information. Maybe we've only been in market for a certain length of time. Maybe this is a completely new product that we don't know as much about. We also have a variety of tools and tactics where we can supplement research approaches, whether it be participation audits, that might be a combination of like touch points and search. We could do dynamic personas, which really understands who are our searchers and what are their behaviors. How can we dive deep into really understanding that? We might do a keyword correlation study. What's the relationship between the keywords, the media strategies, and the search journey? So what, again, focusing back on the action, what action are we trying to inspire? And what's the consequence of that? And what do we learn from that? And obviously, it's really important to align this with all the media planning process beyond just search. So our most successful examples of this are working with our clients, not just isolated on search, but also looking at the entire media landscape and the entire experience landscape. So I won't go into this because you guys can't read this too much, but I think what's important to think about is if you're really rethinking your strategy with Insight, you really think about your questions and your hypothesis related to actions. So what action do you want someone to take? So I'll just pick one. So for example, how do participant groups translate advertising stimuli into search queries? So we have a television ad, and we think we designed the ad to get them to do X. What actually occurred there? Where's the source, and what are the key takeaways? And we can really build a strategy and build a map based on these actions. The last thing I'll say here is, just like with the Mavens, this can quickly become overwhelming. So I think the key thing is to focus on key areas and prioritize what's important to your business. I think Stephen said this really well this morning, which was, you want to be able to use data in a way that frees you up and to allow you to invest creatively in ways that, rather than bog you down and overwhelm you with data. And that's the point here. 2 things to close. The first one is to remember that the participant expects this seamless experience from us today. And this is something that I think we try to stay cognizant of, and even in our small performance marketing world. But obviously, like I mentioned, where we have the best engagements, where I think we're delivering the most strategic and innovative and revolutionary marketing approaches, are with those clients where we either work with their media and creative partners to develop that holistic experience. And we're really doing this on behalf not of the brand, but also for the participant, because they expect that holistic relationship. So lastly, I mentioned to you that recently we had the opportunity, we were asked by one of our clients to evaluate a program where they had invested. Actually, it was a sponsorship, it wasn't a search program. It wasn't actually something that we had done for them, a different partner had done for them. And actually, in the process of doing this evaluation of the investment in their program, we found that they had a competitor that invested almost the same way in the same program, and it was a very telling outcome. On the one hand, Brand A had done amazing things to actually develop an ongoing relationship that motivated people to continually take action on behalf of their brand related to the actual program. And they did all kinds of things. They learned that there were certain sub-audiences or some subgroups of participants who had a real keen interest in the space. And so they developed programs and augmented the program to include those. They surrounded it with search. They provided many content-heavy sites. They created community-type opportunities. They created content that was shareable. Brand B created it like we would in the old days. They had a campaign. It launched at a certain time, and when they were done with the campaign, they took it completely down. It disappeared. Even their Facebook pages, they deleted. And so you see one brand that had that spiral that just kept building and getting bigger and bigger, and the Brand B, they had a spike, and then almost as soon as they got it, it was gone. And it just shows that in today's environment, it's really important, if you really want to have that true ROI, to develop that long-term approach, that relational approach that motivates people to take part, to join, to share, to like, to become engaged with you, and to keep that spiral spinning. Oops, I thought I had one more, but I guess that's it. What I wanted to close you with, since I don't have that slide, obviously from an insights standpoint, don't think of performance just at the end of the program. Did I succeed or did I not succeed? How can I actually use performance cues and performance cues to actually inform my next campaign or even inform my current campaign? Again, I think probably the easiest analogy to remember is how can I become less like a hunter and more like a gardener in my marketing programs? And with that, you will actually create more active understanding of the participants that you're trying to have that relationship with. Thank you.